Hello, everyone. This is Crypto BitLaw back with today's blockchain law, policy, and regulation update. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. And it was a pretty busy day, so we have a lot going on. So let's take a look and see what the major happenings are in the digital asset space as it pertains to law, policy, and regulation. We can see that there is finally an end to the Russian crypto ban FUD, that Russia is going to regulate crypto like foreign currencies. Recently, the DOJ seized $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin tied to the 2016 Bitfinex hack. Moreover, a federal judge stayed the release of the defendants that were alleged to have laundered the related funds. Congress addresses stablecoins at a digital asset hearing. Lawmakers take aim at Puerto Rico as a crypto tax haven. Coinbase files to form a PAC, or a political action committee, ahead of the midterm elections of 2022. And the Ukraine is using Bitcoin to crowdfund its defense operations. So, as always, if you enjoy this content, please smash that like button below and subscribe to our channel. That would really help us spread this information, get the message out there. And if you want to skip around to any one of these stories, you can find a link to that particular story in the timeline below. So with that said, let's dig and dive right on in. So first up on the docket, we can see that there's finally an end to this Russian crypto ban FUD. It seems that the government and the central bank have finally come to an agreement with how they are going to handle and treat and regulate cryptos. They say Russian government and central bank agreed to treat Bitcoin as currency. Cryptocurrency transactions of more than 600,000 rubles, or roughly $8,000, will have to be declared. Otherwise, it could be considered a criminal act. The government and central bank in Russia have reached an agreement on how to regulate cryptocurrencies, according to a Tuesday announcement. Russia's government and central bank are now working on a draft law that will define crypto as an analog of currencies, rather than digital financial assets set to be launched on February 18th. Cryptocurrencies would function in the legal industry only if they have complete identification through the banking system or licensed intermediaries. Commerçant noted that Bitcoin transactions and possession of cryptocurrency in the Russian Federation are not prohibited. However, they must be done through a, quote, digital currency exchange organizer, or also kind of referred to as a bank, or a peer-to-peer exchange license in the country. The report also highlights that currency transactions of more than 600,000 rubles, roughly $8,000, would have to be declared. Otherwise, it could be considered a criminal act. Those who illegally accept cryptocurrencies as payment will incur fines. This news comes after months of speculation about how the Russian government will handle digital currencies. While it's still unclear that what this decision will mean for businesses and citizens in Russia, it seems that the country is slowly warming up to the idea of cryptos. In January, the Bank of Russia called for a nationwide crypto ban in a report that warned about the speculative nature of the industry. The bank also stated that financial firms should not facilitate crypto transactions as part of that proposal to ban digital assets. However, the proposal generated opposition from the Russian Ministry of Finance. A few days after the central bank's call for a ban, Ivan Chebskov, a ministry official, said that the government should regulate crypto rather than prohibiting it entirely. He warned that a total ban might result in Russia falling behind in technology. Reports have also emerged that President Vladimir Putin supports efforts to regulate the country's crypto mining sector. So, I mean, we've been reporting on this for a while, and I think that this was ultimately the smart move by the Russian government. They realized that there's a lot of opportunity in this space. And like they noted here in this report, it's really easy to fall behind if you're going to forego the ability to spur innovation and development in this space in favor of some sort of, fiat hegemony of your ruble, right? So Putin, he's a smart guy. He might not be the most altruistic person, but I mean, he's smart nonetheless. He's cunning. And he knows that, Russia's in a position to really stand out as a leader in this space for the fact that they have a lot of, really smart developers, and they also have a surplus of energy that they can leverage in order to become a leader in the mining space with, proof of work and Bitcoin in particular. So I think that this is a really good, equilibrium, a really good, meeting of the minds, between those who would otherwise want to ban crypto and those that want to embrace it. It's good that they actually came to an agreement, and they actually got a deal done. And overall, this is bullish news for the space. I remember back when there was a significant dip in January, it almost timed itself perfectly with news of this potential ban coming out of Russia with that report from their central bank. But it's good. Things are finally on the up and up, and this is very bullish. I think that adoption and regulation is inevitable, and it's the smart, appropriate way to approach these things. All right, so next up on the docket, we can see that U.S. officials recently seized $3.6 billion in Bitcoin from the 2016 Bitfinex hack. Nearly 120,000 Bitcoin were stolen in that hack. And this is a pretty complicated story. It's a follow-up to something that we reported on, I think, earlier last week, where some funds that were linked to that hack had finally moved, and it was kind of, moving the markets a little bit. Like, oh, these funds are finally moving around. Are they going to dump? What's going on here? So this is a pretty complicated story, and we're going to, just kind of dive into pretty much all of this because it does a pretty good wrap-up and ties together a lot of these different moving parts. So they say, federal officials seized some $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin tied to the 2016 hack of the crypto exchange Bitfinex. Agents arrested two individuals in New York on Tuesday on charges that they conspired to launder proceeds from the Bitfinex hack in 2016. The married couple, Ilya Dutch Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan, will appear in court at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time in New York, according to a U.S. Department of Justice press release. Some 120,000 Bitcoin was stolen in the 2016 hack, then worth around $60 million, and representing nearly 1/6 of the total trading volume at the time. At today's prices, the total amount of Bitcoin stolen is valued at $4.5 billion, but the DOJ only seized about 94,000 Bitcoin valued at $3.6 billion. The DOJ release alleges that the two conspire to launder these proceeds and heavily implies, but does not claim, that they were the original hackers. Quote, unauthorized transactions moved the stolen Bitcoin to Lichtenstein's wallet, and some 25,000 of the Bitcoin were transferred out over the past 5 years. The remaining 94,000 Bitcoin remained in Lichtenstein's wallet. Quote, after the execution of the court-authorized search warrants of online accounts controlled by Lichtenstein and Morgan, special agents obtained access to files within an online account controlled by Lichtenstein, the press release said. Those files contained the private keys required to access the digital wallet that directly received the funds stolen from Bitfinex, and allowed special agents to lawfully seize and recover more than 94,000 Bitcoin that had been stolen from Bitfinex. The recovered Bitcoin was valued at over $3.6 billion at the time of the seizure. Now, as an aside here, this was really, really, really bad OPSEC, or operational security, in terms of these alleged money launderers. I mean, if they're holding keys or information related to keys in online accounts, anything that's hot like that, I mean, that's just a really bad move. You would think if you're playing with that level of money and dealing in nefarious deeds, then you would be a little more secure about how you're playing that. But hey, what can I say? Continuing on, they say last week, on-chain sleuths spotted a transfer of over 94,000 of Bitfinex Bitcoin. Sources told CoinDesk the transfer was a seizure conducted by federal agents. In a statement, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco said it was, quote, the department's largest financial seizure ever. Wow. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, I guess that's bullish for crypto. I mean, that's a lot of money, and it's the DOJ's biggest financial seizure ever. When you consider all of the terrorism, the money, related to drug money and laundering and human trafficking and all of that, this was the biggest one ever. Wow. Continuing on, they say, according to an attached statement of facts, quote, U.S. authorities traced the stolen funds on the Bitcoin blockchain as proceeds from the hack moved out of the initial recipient wallet to wallets allegedly controlled by Lichtenstein and Morgan. Law enforcement officials were able to access the initial recipient wallet, dubbed Wallet 1CGA4S, after decrypting a file, quote, saved to Lichtenstein's cloud storage account, which included 2,000 crypto wallet addresses and their private keys. Again, as an aside, how stupid of these alleged money laundering criminals. I mean, you're going to keep a file in your cloud storage with information, either the keys or information on how to decrypt and get these keys in a cloud file, and you think it's okay just because it's encrypted? No. I mean, there are services out there where you can literally pay in Bitcoin and upload a hash, right? An encrypted file. And these services will use their botnets, their zombie armies of nodes and computers under their control, and all of that processing power, leverage all of that. They virtually have a supercomputer that they can leverage to crack that encryption, and you think the government doesn't have this? How stupid can you be? It just makes no sense. But continuing, some say these. No one said these criminals were smart. So, all right. Continuing on, they say blockchain analysis confirmed that almost all of those wallets were directly linked to the hack, the statement said. The defendants allegedly used a number of techniques to launder the stolen Bitcoin, including splitting transactions up into, quote, thousands of smaller transactions, using darknet markets, and converting into other types of crypto, such as Monero. The statement named darknet market Alphabay as one such platform, allegedly used by the defendants. The statement of facts further alleges some of the funds went into an account tied to a company called SalesFolk, which was owned by Morgan. LinkedIn profiles show a Heather R. Morgan and Dutch Ilya Lichtenstein have listed themselves as employees of SalesFolk since 2019 and 2014, respectively. Morgan's LinkedIn suggests she was also a former columnist at Inc. magazine and Forbes, while Lichtenstein's lists previous roles at Mix Rank, Impasse, and 500 startups. In a statement, Bitfinex said it would work with the DOJ to try and recover the seized Bitcoin. If it does, it will repay investors in its UNUSSED LEO token, which was created to try and backstop a fiscal hole created after an unrelated payment processor used Bitfinex was seized by authorities in 3 different countries. Quote, if Bitfinex receives a recovery of the stolen Bitcoin as described in the UNUSSED LEO token white paper, Bitfinex will, within 18 months of the date it receives that recovery, use an amount equal to 80% of the recovered net funds to repurchase and burn outstanding LEO tokens. The company said, these tokens repurchases can then be accomplished in open market transactions or by acquiring LEO in the over-the-counter trades, including directly trading Bitcoin for LEO. The LEO token began pumping against the dollar on Bitfinex just after this news came out, climbing from $4.97 to $7 within an hour. So, with all that said, you could take a look here. Here's a copy of the press release. It's really interesting. It's a pretty, in-depth press release. It's got a lot of those nitty-gritty details, the juiciest parts of which were mentioned in that report. As we can see here, special agents obtained access to files within an online account controlled by Liechtenstein. They contained the private keys to access the digital wallet, which ultimately allowed them to recover the Bitcoin. They say, quote, criminals always leave tracks. In today's case is a reminder that the FBI has the tools to follow the digital trail wherever it may leave. And that is just a reaffirmation of that point that I was trying to drive home earlier. I mean, you could try to hide this. I mean, if you're going to do it, just don't be stupid. I mean, you're keeping those files in an encrypted file on an online cloud storage provider. I mean, that's just, man, that's next level stupidity. They also say Liechtenstein and Morgan are charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, and conspiracy to defraud the United States, which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. And then also, here's another link to that story that we reported on earlier, where this Bitcoin was moved earlier on, and the on-chain sleuths were, just trying to figure out, oh, yeah, what the hell's going on here? All this money's moving around. Here is a copy of the statement of facts that was filed in conjunction with the warrants. This is actually pretty interesting. What it does, it outlines all of the exchanges that these alleged money launderers used to funnel this money down and try to wash it following the hack. They cite these things they refer to them as VCEs, or virtual currency exchanges. And then as we could see down here, they reference that they, used accounts that they had at Alphabay to try to offload some of this cash, or Bitcoin rather, for cash. And then we can see here's some of the juicy parts right here, where they actually have a flow chart of how the money was filtered down. So you can see it starts right here at the victim virtual currency exchange, right? And then they'll move it from there to Alphabay, and then from Alphabay back to themselves, right? And then they use all of these different transactions. And then even over here, they've got them using things like PlayStation Network and Walmart and Uber and Hotels.com to try to filter this money down. A symbol with an orange and a gray circle with the right M is a representation of Monero, right? So this is really interesting. You can dive deeper down into here. Here we can see all the transactions and the wallets and just all the really interesting on-chain analysis that was involved in. I mean, I think I might do another video just on breaking this down, because this is fascinating. And, I was a prosecutor back in the day. It really wasn't that long ago, but Man, I'd really like to break all this down. This is just really fascinating stuff, how they leveraged all of this information in order to crack this case. But yeah, that's what's going on in terms of this story. All right, this is pretty juicy. This is an extension of the story about the Bitfinex hack money launderers and all that. So we can see here a judge stays the release of the Bitfinex hack laundering suspects. Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan were arrested Tuesday on allegations they conspired to launder Bitcoin from the 2016 hack. They say a federal judge has halted the release of two individuals suspected of laundering proceeds from the 2016 Bitfinex hack. Chief Judge Beryl Howell of the U.S. District Court for Washington, D.C., stayed an earlier order by a New York magistrate judge to release Ilya Dutch Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan on bail. The two were arrested Tuesday by federal officials on charges stemming from the 2016 hack of the Bitfinex crypto exchange. The U.S. Department of Justice also said officials seized $94,000 of Bitcoin worth $3.5 billion. Intercity Press first reported the news late Tuesday. Judge Howell's order will stay the release until her court can further review the initial order. Prosecutors sought pretrial detention during the hearing this afternoon, arguing the pair might be a flight risk. Magistrate Judge Deborah Freeman of the Southern District of New York sentenced Lichtenstein to home detention with a wearable GPS and a $5 million bond, while Morgan got the same but with a $3 million bond. The parents of both defendants were required, as a condition of the bond, to pledge their homes as collateral. The couple will spend at least Tuesday night in jail, pending an investigation by pretrial service officers. So as we can see here, I mean, just the skinny on this is, naturally these defendants are trying to get out of jail on bond. And originally it seems like the court was going to grant that to them. A magistrate judge agreed to conditions of the bond and to let them out on bond. However, the government, the state, took an emergency writ, or, I guess in lay people, it's analogous to an appeal where you can appeal or just have an order of a lower court reviewed, rather, by a higher court. And so they sought review of that decision of the magistrate judge to release them on bond. And the higher court looked at it and said, oh no you don't, not so fast. So we can see here's a copy of the order that stayed. A stay is pretty much a sidelining of a lower court's order. You can ask them to stay this ruling. And so they sought an emergency stay and a review of the detention order. And so the higher court granted it. Right here, here's a copy of this that was posted in a tweet. Here's the criminal complaint that was filed. But even more interesting, here's a copy of the docket that we could see. And, it started on February 7th. Everything was sealed, and then it was eventually unsealed. And then we could see here was the order on the motion to stay that eventually came out. So if you want to check out the docket, the links are going to be in the description below. But back to the story, where it gets into some more of the juicy parts. They say the government initially asked for a $100 million bond, which was quickly rejected. The defense countered with a $1 million bond, which was also rejected. Lichtenstein must obtain signatures on his bond from 5 people, the judge ordered. Morgan was required to get 2, which her parents agreed to provide. Defense attorneys told the court that Morgan has health problems, including recent breast surgery, and that incarceration would be dangerous for her. She gets migraine headaches when exposed to bright lights and had to go to the hospital on Tuesday after her arrest around 7 a.m. Eastern, according to her attorneys. I didn't know that. Being arrested, it could be a stressful experience? Huh, who knew? Huh. I mean, just the things that some of these defense attorneys will come up with. I mean, it never really ceases to amaze me. Oh, judge, my client gets headaches, all right, give her special treatment. Wow. Continuing on, they say, according to a criminal complaint attached to the DOJ press release, the two are both being charged with money laundering, conspiracy, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. They're not being charged with conducting the hack itself. Now into the juicier parts. Defense attorneys said that their defendants have been aware of the investigation since at least this past November, after one of their service providers received a subpoena, but had not fled ahead of their arrest. This was the reason the judge said she granted bail. Prosecutors said during the hearing that the defendants had a file on their computer titled, quote, passport_ideas.txt with information about obtaining passports through the darknet markets. Quote, here's what I'm thinking. On flight risk, the standard is a preponderance of the evidence. It's clear that the defendants have means, have traveled, and that these charges are serious. I'm troubled by the cloud-based account about the passports, Freeman, the prosecutor, said during the hearing. One of the defense attorneys said that the file was meant to open financial accounts rather than facilitate a flight to safety. Sure they were, buddy. Sure, right? Yeah, if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. All right, a plastic bag full of cell phones labeled, quote, burner phone. Wow. Labeled, quote, burner phones. They're going to label the cell phones. Burner phones was found under the couple's bed, prosecutors said in court. As a condition of the bond, the defendants are allowed to spend up to $10,000 a month on living expenses, but they are forbidden to drain their bank accounts or make any cryptocurrency transactions, the judge said. Another condition, the couple's cell phones and computers will be confiscated, and they will be given a flip phone and one internet-connected device monitored by pretrial services so they can access their bank accounts and email their lawyers. Right? So, I mean, this was just an interesting development. I'm interested to see how this is going to shake out. I doubt they're going to actually give them. You never know nowadays. I mean, it's possible they could, and clearly, I mean, if they were in the position to front for a $5 million bond, or however much it was originally set out, it was in the millions. Then I mean, it wouldn't be too shocking that they could post a bond that's even larger than that. I guess it's just a matter of whether or not they're actually going to give them this bond. And yeah, we're going to keep you up to date to see how this plays out, whether or not the court's going to decide to actually go through with this. So I thought that this was really interesting, a nice little kind of anecdote on top of the previous story, just kind of what's going on in these people's minds, with the passport_ideas.text and a bag labeled burner phones. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's as a prosecutor, my spidey senses are going off, and just some of the BS that these defense attorneys are coming up with, like, oh, passportideas.text wasn't, for us to get passports to flee the country. We just actually wanted to open new bank accounts. And, oh, please take pity on my client. She gets headaches, and she was stressed when she got arrested. Just like, God, give me a break. Ugh. Just as an aside to this thing, I hate to keep touching on it, but this thing just gets stranger and stranger. Cointelegraph also ran a story on just how ridiculous these alleged criminal masterminds are. And it brings up a good point. This tweet right here that says that this whole thing is a psyop, psyop to make us look stupid for being hacked by the most inept criminals on earth. And then it just cites some really strange TikToks from one of these defendants. You can go check it out here. I mean, this girl's like dancing and rapping around, and she's just looking very foolish. Same thing here, and other people that have done some sleuthing and digging into her, and they describe her as a trash fire of public LinkedIn pages, deranged outfit choices, so on and so forth. It's just, take a look here. You can get some inside baseball on these people. I mean, it's just, this kind of reminds me of the whole, what was it? It was the Colonial Pipeline hack. It's just another, like, come on, like, something doesn't add up here. But yeah, take a look. The link's going to be in the description below. So next up, we could see that recently the House of Representatives held a hearing on the issue of stablecoins, and they say that the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services is discussing stablecoin regulations with Treasury Undersecretary for Domestic Finance, Nellie Lang. The hearing, coming in the wake of a report from the President's Working Group on Financial Markets, will seek to better understand the possible risks regulators see in stablecoin proliferation, as well as what sort of regulatory framework can best address them. So there are some interesting takeaways from this hearing. I'm going to go over them below. But as an aside, if you want to actually see the report, I'm going to link a copy of the report down in the description below. Here it is, pretty long and drawn out. I think one congressman said that, in this report, they mentioned potential risks, like something like 30-something times, but only benefits twice. So, I mean, it was kind of bearish in that sense that I think this one congressman also called out the report for, acting as, air cover for big banks. So that was interesting. There's also another article that does an opinion piece on the hearing that's also going to be linked down in the description below. This one's also pretty detailed if you want to learn more about it. But just going over some of the bigger takeaways, we could see here is Warren Davidson. He had a good point. He called for more detailed discussion on stablecoins and distinguish between the various issuers out there. He called Tether a time bomb, but said that USDC, the second largest stablecoin, is highly regulated. So, this is the one. He also criticized President's Working Group report, calling it a big bank protection concept. So, yeah, that's the man right there, calling it out for what it is. As an aside, one of my key takeaways from this was that I always, envisioned a situation where the government would either A, issue a CBDC and kind of cast stablecoins to the side, or B, actually embrace stablecoins and get some sort of framework for regulation for the issuers of stablecoins and pretty much regulate them as de facto banks, but always kind of looked at that as mutually exclusive. But here, my takeaway from here was that this undersecretary that was the witness, she pretty much said, hey, everything is fair game. There could be a situation in which the Fed releases a CBDC and the government also chooses to regulate stablecoins as banks. And so you could have both coexisting at the same time, which I thought was an interesting point. Here we could also see that Tom Emmer from Minnesota, he pointed out that while stablecoins represent just 5% of the digital assets industry's total value, they account for more than 75% of crypto trading, which is why they can't be ignored. He also criticized the president's working group report, noting that while it doesn't even provide a definition of stablecoins, it didn't hesitate to assert their risks are broad and cross numerous jurisdictional lines. A bank-like regulatory framework, said Emmer, would be improper for stablecoins and inadvertently engulf potential future financial products that are vastly different than what is now considered a stablecoin. According to Emmer, quote, banks should not be the only institutions in the ecosystem with dibs to issue the potential array of financial products that the president's working group report simply lumps together and ties to stablecoin. So yeah, I mean, that's another, really common sense approach. This guy right here from Texas, he threw some shade at Doge, and he said that if you invest in nothing, there is a good likelihood that at some point you'll get what you pay for, and that causes me a good deal of concern. Ludemeyer from Missouri asked if there was a way to incentivize stablecoin issuers to use the dollar as backing to ensure stability. He said they have a natural incentive to use the dollar because it is the global currency. I believe that incentives we need to put in place to ensure that it remains the global currency, the world reserve currency. And that was another big theme. It seemed that on both sides of the aisle, both of these lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, were both in agreement that they should do whatever needs to be done in order to shore up the dollar's place as the global reserve currency. And that seemed like that was a pretty common theme. And then we have Brad Sherman, the guy that went viral, the Mongoose coin dude. You remember what could Mongoose coin do to crypto coin? Yeah, this guy. And he said that Facebook's Libra, later branded as Diem, proposed stablecoin had so much money and power behind it that could have emerged as an everyday currency. Which, I don't know where he's coming from with that, because, the last time I checked, that project flopped. He also said that the risks from stablecoins could affect both investors and the monetary system. Quote, we're talking about the risks to investors, and they are substantial, he said. He asked Lang if she could offer specific statutes that Congress could implement as part of her work with the president's working group. That was another takeaway that I took from this. I remember at some point, some of these congressmen or congresswomen, they were talking about stablecoins as investments, and that's just... And there was actually some pushback from some of these, more educated Congress people, where they called back on those sorts of takes where people were treating stablecoins as investments, saying like, look, why would you ever invest in a stablecoin? That doesn't make sense because it's pretty much the same thing as holding cash or fiat dollars. So if you know that inflation is on the rise and you're going to be debased at a certain rate every year, why would you invest in this? The whole point of investing is to try to seek alpha, to try to get alpha where you could. So, you'd have a better time throwing your cash or your dollars or deploying your stable coins into actual projects where you could get alpha. So, there's still a lot of, misinformation out there, a lot of people that need a little more education and clarity on this issue. But I think ultimately it's bullish that the government is actually trying to dig down and figure this out and work together and find out what is the best approach in order to best implement these stablecoins. So next up we could see as a corollary to the previous story on the hearing regarding stablecoins in Congress, we could see that a lawmaker takes aim at Puerto Rico as a crypto tax haven. Representative Nidia Velazquez called for tougher action against crypto millionaires using Puerto Rico as a tax shelter. So I guess the skinny on this is that a congresswoman's comments reveal growing hostility towards Puerto Rico's crypto millionaires, but it's unlikely that policy change will follow anytime soon. They say, stories about crypto millionaires decamping to Puerto Rico have become commonplace in recent years. The island's attraction lies in its sandy beaches, mild climate, and its reputation as a place for U.S. residents to avoid paying taxes. For those of you that don't know, Puerto Rico, although it's a territory of the United States, they don't have capital gains tax like we have here in the United States. So, or just the greater 50 or lower 48, I guess is what it is. So, how you're taxed on your crypto earnings as capital gains here, you could go to Puerto Rico become a resident of Puerto Rico and take all your gains and then not have to pay taxes on it. So, continuing on, they say, not everyone's happy about this. That is the tax haven in Puerto Rico. On Tuesday, Brooklyn lawmaker Nydia Velasquez, a Democrat from New York, surprise, complained that Puerto Rico has become a haven for rich crypto speculators from the mainland and asked a Treasury Department official if Congress could help, quote, go after crypto investors trying to use Puerto Rico as a tax shelter. They say Velasquez's comments came during a hearing of the House Financial Services Committee, which was examining the broader topic of stablecoins. The Congresswoman is originally from Puerto Rico and, like many who live in her New York City district, maintains strong ties with the island. Her remarks elicited a strong reaction on Twitter, where many applauded her desire to go after people they portrayed as wealthy and unwanted interlopers. One attorney from with a Puerto Rican flag in his profile, complained of a, quote, white supremacist fantasy of Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. But as an aside, I mean, this whole thing as wealthy white interlopers, I mean, I wonder how this would be interpreted if this situation was flipped around and we had the inverse of this. But that's neither here nor there. You know, I guess the outrage can go both ways. Yeah. We could see the tweet here. This one dude, he calls it out as it happening in real time. You know, the representative asked Congress if Congress can help the IRS, quote, go after crypto investors trying to use Puerto Rico as a tax shelter. And then Home Dog comes along and says, you will not be allowed to blithely gentrify the island, displacing Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico to create your own private playground. Your white supremacy fantasy, Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans, is over. Get out. Okay. All right, Betty. So yeah, ultimately it's unclear if Velasquez's comments will have any impact on the U.S. or Puerto Rico tax policy, especially as the focus of Tuesday's hearing did not relate to Puerto Rico. But it could serve to warn wealthy crypto investors that the tax benefit may not exist forever and that many on the island may not want them there in the first place. Okay, well, I mean, I think that's the big takeaway here. You know, it's clearly, I think that they're going to try to shut down this loophole, the government that is, in due time. I think that that's going to be the inevitable. You know, for me, it's another, you know, aside from this, is the hypocrisy of how it's just okay for, you know, these Puerto Rican islanders to not want any of the gentrifiers there. But, yeah, surprise. Next song. And surprise, surprise, we can see here that Coinbase files to form a PAC, or a political action committee, ahead of the 2020 midterms. And for those of you that don't know, PACs, or political action committees, are the entities for organizations that are tasked with lobbying and pushing policy and, you know, corporate agenda in Congress, right? So they say crypto firms are vying for influence in Washington, D.C., which is a no-brainer now that there is so much money filing into the space. Coinbase is packing a political action committee this election cycle. On Monday, the publicly traded crypto firm registered, quote, Coinbase Innovation PAC, with the Federal Election Commission sending a strong signal of its desire to sway federal officials during the 2022 midterm election cycle. The crypto exchange is hardly alone. Industry heavyweights formed their own pro-crypto PAC late last month. Politico first reported the Coinbase filing. They say forming a PAC could shift Coinbase's horse trading further down the food chain to candidates for office. Filings indicate that Coinbase's PAC and its lobbying efforts are closely aligned. Coinbase formed a PAC in 2018, but quickly scuttled the effort with nothing to show for it. Quote, Coinbase is committed to engaging with policymakers to promote crypto-forward policy at the federal level in the United States, a Coinbase spokesperson told CoinDesk via email. Quote, we believe the bipartisan potential is clear, and we intend to support crypto-forward lawmakers who align with our mission to advance economic freedom for all Americans. And, you know, I mean, this is a no-brainer, and I think it's ultimately pretty bullish. You know, Coinbase, they are involved with Circle, the USDC stablecoin issuer. So, as we could see and tie back into our previous stories related to stablecoins, we could see that Circle and USDC and, you know, through connection Coinbase, they have an interest in getting common sense legislation that favors their goals passed. And so, I mean, this is just a natural evolution. Moving on to our last story, we can see that Ukraine is using Bitcoin to, quote, crowdfund war with Russia, according to a report. A new report from Elliptic details how NGOs and volunteer groups are using crypto to fund operations against Russia. And the skinny on it is that a new report from Elliptic points to a sharp rise in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency donations to Ukrainian NGOs. Many of these groups provide financial assistance to the military, and others are involved in cyber warfare, they say. As tensions on the Ukraine's border continue to mount, Ukrainian non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, are seeing a sharp rise in Bitcoin donations, according to a news report by blockchain analytics company Elliptic. Russia, unless you've been living under a rock, you would know that Russia has amassed 100,000 to 130,000 troops on its borders with Ukraine and Belarus as a prelude to a potential invasion. The United States, a Ukraine ally, has moved 3,000 troops into the region with another 8,500 on heightened alert. Per the report, in response to the government corruption, local NGOs have begun securing financial support for soldiers, weapons, and medical supplies over the last decade. The Elliptic says that donors are using Bitcoin to funnel money to such NGOs by bypassing any banks and financial institutions that might block payments. Some of the groups Elliptic says are receiving Bitcoin donations include Come Back Alive, which provides training, military, and medical equipment, and the Myrotrovets Center, which has ties to the Ukrainian government. Other include hacktivist groups Ukrainian Cyber Alliance and Belarusian Cyber Partisans, which have engaged in cyber attacks against Russian targets. Elliptic says that in the last year, the Ukrainian Cyber Alliance has alone received close to $100,000 in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and stablecoins. But Ukraine didn't originate the idea. Elliptic says that organizations are taking the idea from pro-Russia groups who began using Bitcoin fundraising as early as 2014. However, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency only make up a small portion of the funding flowing into Ukraine. Most of the funds are fiat currencies through traditional payment systems. And there's the buried lead. People like to throw so much shade at Bitcoin and cryptos for, playing a role in some of these otherwise nefarious activities. But, the truth of the matter is that most of this stuff is done with fiat and traditional payment rails. So, it's only natural that if someone's going to want to try to get money to these groups that have, agendas and goals that align with their ideals, that they're going to use alternative means of payment and funding to actually transfer that money. So if, these groups are locked down through traditional payment networks like PayPal or Visa or any of those things, then the only natural evolution to try to transfer that money would be crypto. But all in all, I think it's bullish. It kind of speaks to the, the power of the blockchain and decentralization. But yeah, with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this content. It surely was a busy day, lots going on. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button. Please also subscribe to our channel. That would really, really, really help us out in the future. We'd really appreciate that. If you want to, you can follow us on Twitter. We post interesting things on Twitter, updates, so on and so forth. Our handle on Twitter is @CryptoBitLaw. And with that said, thank you guys for watching again, and we will see you all in the next video.